Week 6 of the fantasy football season. He has top 36 wide receivers. I'm ranking number 1 Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins. So Hill, we know he's one of the best receivers in the league. Him into a great combination and most dangerous combination in my opinion. And this week with a cupcake matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, I got him in 1. Number 2, Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Chase finally broke out with 15 catches, 192 yards, and 3 touchdowns last week versus the Arizona Cardinals. And this week here versus a mediocre and young secondary of the Seattle Seahawks. I think he has a big game once again. And he said he was open, and he sure was in last week's game. So Chase, one of the best route runners in the league, one of the quickest wide receivers in the league. And this week I think he has a good game. And he's back now. Number 2. Number 3, Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams. So Cooper Kupp last week, he came back and he looked 100%, running his routes, making the big plays, catching the football. And this week versus a weak Arizona secondary that I just mentioned got torched for over 190 yards by Ja'Marr Chase. I think Kupp, he's back, like I said, to 100%. One of the best receivers and route runners in the league as well. And I got him at 3. Number 4, Stefon Diggs, the Buffalo Bills. So Stefon Diggs, what a season it's been for him once again this year. And he's been a top wide receiver for many seasons now in Buffalo in fantasy football. So this week versus a young Giants secondary that can't stop anyone and just gave up big games to Tyreek Hill. I think once again Diggs goes out there, goes over 100 yards and finds the end zone. Number 5, Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Chargers back off a bye, and Keenan Allen's been one of the better wide receivers in fantasy football this season. The only thing without that's held him back throughout his career is injury. But this week here in a pretty good matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys, where I know on paper this Cowboy team's good, but you know, Kellen Moore knows how that defense operates, being the offensive coordinator last season and practicing versus this defense. So I think Keenan Allen has a good game. One of the best receivers in the league this season in fantasy. And this Cowboy team last week gave up 42 points, so it wouldn't be surprising to me if the Chargers put up a big number on the board as well. Number 6, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Brown, we know him and Jalen Hurts a few weeks ago on the sidelines had an argument or whatever the case may be. But ever since then, A.J. Brown's been on a tear, putting up those monster numbers once again this season. So this week here, matchup at the Jets. We know the Jets got a good secondary. Sauce Gardner, one of the up-and-coming corners in the league here. We don't know if he's going to cover Brown and follow him the home game or just stay on one side. But anyway, A.J. Brown, one of the better receivers in the league. Him and Hurts on the same page, getting things going. And this week, number 6, number 7, Davante Adams of the Vegas Raiders. So Davante Adams definitely not 100% with the shoulder injury. And last week he gutted it out versus former team, the Green Bay Packers. And this week here, a good matchup versus the Patriots that are decimated in the secondary, that can't stop anyone, giving up 72 points in the last 2 weeks. Here's this Patriot team. So right now, Adams and Garoppolo trying to get on the same page. This Vegas Raider team trying to win games. And this week here definitely is a winnable game. And Adams still one of the better wide receivers in the league. So I got him at 7. Number 8, Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. He missed last week's game with St. Brown. But this week so far off to a good start practicing and optimism he's going to play. So St. Brown, like I said, one of the better route runners in the league. This guy's got drive and hunger to be one of the best wide receivers in the league, especially carrying around the list of players drafted before him in the NFL draft at the receiver position a few seasons ago. So right now in a beatable matchup at Tampa Bay, as long as he plays, St. Brown is locked in at number 8. Number 9, DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. So DJ Moore, he's really turned things around from last season to this year. Last year was a train wreck over there in Carolina with Baker Mayfield, PJ Walker starting some games at quarterback, Sam Darnold. And now him and Justin Fields, they have a nice 1-2 combo over there for the Chicago Bear team. And Moore coming off an 8-catch, 230-yard, 3-touchdown game is nothing to sneeze at. He's a quick wide receiver. He can run the routes. And Justin Fields, he knows where to get the ball to DJ Moore. And he's been a big red zone target as well this season. So on a potential shootout in a division matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings, I got him at 9. Number 10, Puka Nacua of the Los Angeles Rams. So Puka Nacua last week, I was even worried that his workload would take a big hit with Cooper Kupp back in action. But right now, this is a great 1-2 combo and possibly the best route running combo in the league with Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So he's taken the league by storm in his rookie season. He's a great possession wide receiver, and he's just got a knack to catch the football in great hands. So this week versus a weak secondary of the Arizona Cardinals, I got him at 10. Number 11, Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Ridley, the last few weeks, he was off, but last week had a nice ball game in that one, and the Buffalo Bills in London. So right now, Ridley, a good route runner. Week 1 versus the same Indianapolis Colts team. He had a big fantasy day. And this week, once again, I think he puts in a good performance. And I got him at 11, number 12, CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. So CeeDee Lamb, it's been a down few weeks here for Lamb. And it's obviously not 100% his fault. Dak Prescott is not getting the ball out quick. He's not making the right decisions. And this Cowboy offense just can't move the football well. Guys like Brandon Cooks aren't doing much. Wasn't really producing in this Cowboy offense the last few weeks, even though it's a beatable matchup here for Lamb in this Cowboy offense. I got CeeDee Lamb at number 12, 13, Chris Olave at the New Orleans Saints. So Chris Olave, he's been steady so far this season with Derek Carr. He hasn't had that huge game, 30, 35 fantasy point game. But this week in a game that could be a mini shootout with the Texans and this New Orleans Saints team, I think Chris Olave is one of the better wide receivers up and coming in the league. Decent matchup this week versus Houston, like I said, and him and Derek Carr are still working on chemistry and getting the ball into the right spots. But this week I like him at 13, 14, Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers. So this week here, possibly Denzel Ward will either be on Ayuk or Deebo Samuel. And we know Ward's one of the better corners in the league, with Brandon Ayuk emerging as the number one guy in the pass game for this San Francisco 49er team. He's a good route runner. He could get those jump balls. He's got great breakaway speed. And him and Brock Purdy, they just got great chemistry and a good rapport, better than I think Purdy and Deebo do. So right now I got him at 14, 15, Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Devonta Smith got off to the hot start the first 2 weeks of the season, but the last few weeks we really haven't seen much out of Devonta Smith. But a game like this where you don't expect him to bounce back versus a good defense is when Devonta Smith usually goes out there and he puts up a 30-point fantasy day. So this week at the New York Jets, I think he gets back into the mix of things. They're obviously going to roll coverage a lot on A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, who just came off a good game. So I got Smith at 15. Number 16, Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. So Jalen Waddle so far this season, we really haven't seen that big game out of him as well. 11 to 14 fantasy points has pretty much been the window where he's putting up the points. So this week, a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, one of the worst teams and defenses in the league. And I know Tyreek Hill, he's having a monster year, and it doesn't matter how many guys cover Hill. He's getting open and making plays, but Jalen Waddle's a talented receiver. Last season, over 1,300 yards. See a breakout game where he goes for 100 yards and a touchdown or two possibly, but I got him at 16 in this one. 17, Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. So Deebo Samuel, we know he's the number 2 option, like I mentioned. I think Brandon Ayuk, the number 1 man in the passing game, but Deebo's a gadget guy, could take carries out of the backfield, could do a lot of end arounds. He could even throw the football if he needed for him to at times. And this week here, Cleveland, I think this could be a grinded out type of game in the early going. But Deebo Samuel, he's that game breaker type of player as well, where it just takes one big play to make his fantasy day. So I got him at 17, 18, Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Mike Evans, we know, is banged up after he got hurt in that game at the Saints with a hamstring injury, and he didn't come back. But this week, a pretty decent matchup versus Detroit Lions secondary that's been banged up, and it's beatable for sure. So Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield, they've had a better rapport than Tom Brady and Evans did last season. Evans, he's gone out there and he's made some great plays. He's made some big catches, and this Tampa Bay Buck team's playing well. So as long as Evans is healthy and plays in this one, I think once again he has a good one. And I got him at 18, 19, DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. So DK Metcalf, very talented wide receiver, but also a lot of mouths to feed over there for the Seattle Seahawks team, where so far this season it's been a mixed bag of results here for Metcalf. He had one monster game, and the rest of it has been mediocre to mid performances. So this week here at a Cincinnati secondary that I think is very beatable. Metcalf, a good wide receiver, coming off a bye week as well, where he should be pretty much feeling 100%. And Geno Smith, hopefully healthy as well after getting nicked up in that Week 4 game. Maybe Metcalf gets back on track and puts up good numbers, but either way, he's the number 2 wide receiver most weeks for fantasy owners. Number 20, Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers. Adam Thielen, top 10 in fantasy points this season at the wide receiver position. And this week, it's going to be a game where Jalen Ramsey most likely won't come back for this Dolphin team. And a game also where they're going to be trailing 10, 14 points out of the gate at the Dolphins is this Carolina Panther team. So Adam Thielen, like I said, he's still a solid route runner. Last year, he did look washed up, but now the number 1 option over here in Carolina on a 1-year prove-it deal. And so far, he's proved it. So for fantasy owners who have Adam Thielen, who pretty much took in one of the last rounds of the draft, so a guy who went undrafted, and you picked him up off the waiver wire, he's paying big dividends for fantasy owners so far this season. 21, Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings. And at Justin Jefferson, he's going to be out minimum the next 4 games, going on IR. He and Jordan Addison, let's see if this rookie could go out there and make some big plays. He had a great college football career, and so far in the early going this season, he's gone out there and had some decent games. So this week in a matchup at the Bears where their secondary really can't stop anyone, I think Addison is a solid number 2 wide receiver this week and pretty much going to be acting as the number 1 wide receiver over there in Minnesota with him, KJ Osborne, and Powell. Number 22, T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. So T. Higgins, he's banged up with a rib injury. And to be honest, I don't know if he's going to play in this one. They got a bye week coming up next week. So if they could sit him out one more week here and then he heals and he's almost 100%, that might be the plan for the Cincinnati Bengal team. But T. Higgins, so far, he's only had 1 big game this season. And the rest, he's been pedestrian, his numbers. But I know the same thing with Ja'Marr Chase. 2 good games and 3 pretty much mid-performances for Ja'Marr Chase, and that obviously has a lot to do with Joe Burrow, who the first month of the season didn't look healthy, but last week in Week 5 he looked healthy. This offense, they're going to start to get things going, I believe, and if Higgins does play in this game, it's a decent secondary, but a young one for Seattle, which is beatable. So I got him at 22, 23, Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks. At Tyler Lockett, I say pretty much every video when I talk about him. At the end of the year, the numbers are going to be there, the 1,000 yards and the 8 and 9 touchdowns. So far this season, it's been a tough year here for Tyler Lockett. Only 1 big game and the rest pretty much non-existent for fantasy owners. But this week here in a beatable matchup and a potential shootout with the Seahawks and the Cincinnati Bengals, I think he gets back on track coming off the bye week as well and puts up points. 24, Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns. So Amari Cooper, he's been solid since he's been a Cleveland Brown over the last season and a half here. He can run the routes. We still know he's one of the best route runners in the league. But the only problem in this game is Deshaun Watson might not play, and he's got to deal with P.J. Walker, XFL standout quarterback a few seasons ago, even though we didn't see much out of Walker last year in the few games he started for Carolina. And also San Francisco, one of the best, if not the best defenses in the league. But this could be a game where they're down early and often, and they got to throw the football 35 times in this one. So right now, even in a tough matchup and with possibly a backup quarterback starting this game, I think Amari Cooper is still a top 24 option and a number 2 receiver for your team this week. Number 25, Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. So Garrett Wilson, at least he hasn't been totally not putting up anything for fantasy owners. The last couple weeks he's been serviceable, and we know Zach Wilson's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league here. So if Garrett Wilson, let's say, had an Aaron Rodgers or some other quarterback, he definitely would be a top 10, top 15 wide receiver each and every week, or possibly even higher in the rankings. So this week here, tough matchup versus Philly, even though it's a secondary that we've seen players have big games. Puka Nacua last week, a big game. A few weeks ago, Terry McLaurin had a pretty solid game versus defense, and their beatable secondary in garbage time and even sometimes getting behind the defense. But anyway, Wilson, I got at 25, 26, Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Christian Kirk, him and Trevor Lawrence have a great rapport. He's a speed guy, he's Christian Kirk, and he could open things up over the top and even work the middle of the field with a lot of slant and crossing routes. He is Christian Kirk. So this week he in a beatable matchup versus a middle-of-the-pack Indianapolis Colts team and a division rival, which Kirk obviously knows well over the last few seasons, being a Jaguar. I got him at 26, 27, Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. And Nico Collins, it's been his breakout season this year here for him. We saw flashes last year, but now with him and C.J. Stroud at quarterback, he's looked well, is Nico Collins. But the pattern I've noticed with Collins the first 5 weeks of the season, he'll have one monster game and then a game he don't show up. So right now, the way the pattern's going, he's due for a big game. But this New Orleans defense is stout. Marshawn Lattimore, I believe, will be on him in this game for the majority of it. But this could be a potential shootout or grinded out type of game like it was last week with Houston and Atlanta. And they lost at the buzzer on a field goal. But anyway, Collins 27-28, Hollywood Brown of the Arizona Cardinals. So Hollywood Brown, he's had 16 or more fantasy points in 4 out of 5 games so far this season in PPR leagues. And this is going to be another game where the Cardinals most likely will be trailing at the Los Angeles Rams. Indoor game, obviously, always a plus. Not have to deal with the weather or the elements or anything like that. And him and Joshua Dobbs have a great rapport. Dobbs leans on Zach Ertz and Hollywood Brown the most in this offense. So this week he has a flex option, or even a borderline number 2 wide receiver. I have him in 28, 29, Gabe Davis of the Buffalo Bills. So Gabe Davis, he's really turning it on now over the last few weeks. And I thought he would be this deep ball threat and a great play last season for the Bills, but it didn't come to fruition. But this year, he's been more than just a touchdown guy. Last week, going over 100 yards and finding the end zone versus Jacksonville. And this week here, a great matchup versus the Giants, a young secondary and a team that's been getting torched throughout the season through the air. So I think Gabe Davis has another good one this week, and I got him at 29. Number 30, DeAndre Hopkins of the Tennessee Titans. So Hopkins finally had that breakout game as a Tennessee Titan last week. Went for 8 catches, 140 yards in that one at the Indianapolis Colts, a team that obviously throughout his career, going back to his Houston Texan days, he's pretty much owned them. But anyway, a tough matchup this week versus the Baltimore Ravens. And Ryan Tannehill, I think he's going to have a hard time with this pass rush of Baltimore and just a bad offensive line blocking for him as well. And he holds on to the football too much this time. So this week here, Hopkins, I'm not expecting much out of him. 10, 12 fantasy points in PPR leagues, even though maybe he could have a surprising game. But this week I got him at 30. 31, Zay Flowers staying in the same game of the Baltimore Ravens. So right now, Lamar Jackson, a lot of people think he don't have help. But to be honest, they're not just going back to the basics here, making these quick plays and these quick routes here for guys like Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. So Flowers started off the season great, but the last few weeks the numbers have dropped off where he's pretty much putting up 10, 11 fantasy points in PPR leagues, which obviously is still serviceable, but that's not number 2 wide receiver production. So this week on paper, it's definitely a great matchup at Tennessee. That's one of the worst teams in the league versus the pass. But right now, like I said, the numbers have gone down weekly here for Zay Flowers, and who knows what we're going to see this week. Lamar Jackson, he's not making great decisions, and he's been inconsistent as well in terms of throwing the football. Number 32, Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts. So Michael Pittman now with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. I know early in the season versus Baltimore in Week 3, Pittman had a good ball game, but this week here versus a pretty solid Jacksonville Jaguar defense so far this season, I think Michael Pittman might be in for a tougher game. Most people think he's still a borderline 2 to flex option. He's Michael Pittman, but like I said, Gardner Minshew in there at quarterback. He was a former Jacksonville Jaguar. And this Jaguar defense, for the most part, they've kept teams off the board. They gave up the Bills only 20 points last week. I know both wide receivers had 100 yards plus in that game with a touchdown. But this is not the same type of offense, obviously, as Indianapolis. Nowhere near the Buffalo Bills. So I think Jacksonville could limit to Michael Pittman to a decent game. And he's at 32. 33, Jacoby Myers of the Vegas Raiders. Jacoby Myers, he's been playing great football in his first season with his Vegas Raider team. And him and Jimmy Garoppolo have a good rapport. Obviously, they're both familiar with this Josh McDaniel offense where they were both players in New England. And this is obviously a redemption type of game here for Jacoby Myers, a revenge game versus former team in the New England Patriots. So Myers getting a ton of targets from Jimmy Garoppolo. He's going out there making plays. And him and Davante Adams is definitely a solid 1-2 combo. So this week versus a banged-up secondary of the Patriots and his former team, I got him at 33. 34, Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. So Scary Terry, he does this pretty much each and every season. He'll have some monster games, and then he'll put in those mid-performances. Like last week, we only had 8.90 fantasy points, but in a potential shootout indoors over there in Atlanta, Sam Howell definitely targets McLaurin a lot. They have good ESP and a good rapport, and I think McLaurin, as a number 3 wide receiver or flex option each and every week, is a great play. Number 35, Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Chris Godwin and Baker Mayfield, they've had some good plays so far this season. But Godwin, I think, was better off with Tom Brady because it's more Baker Mayfield than Mike Evans. The nice 1-2 combo right there. So Godwin, he's still possession receiver. PPR leagues expect anywhere 11, 14 points pretty much weekly. And this week here in a potential shootout versus a good Detroit team who's 4-1 on the season. I think Chris Godwin could put in a decent performance and is a solid flex option this week. Final wide receiver I'm ranking this week, Josh Reynolds staying in the same game of the Detroit Lions. Him and Jared Goff go back as teammates to the Los Angeles Rams. And Reynolds already this season has 4 touchdowns. So this week in a potential shootout at Tampa Bay here, I think Josh Reynolds could get his 40, 50 yards. And it's just depending on that touchdown because he has been a touchdown-dependent wide receiver. But like I said, pretty much the number 2 or 3 option in that offense because if St. Brown don't play, he's number 2 behind Sam Laporta. And if Brown does play, he's the number 3 option in the passing game. So that's the top 36 wide receivers I'm ranking in Week 6 of the fantasy football season.